Hi, I'm Laura, and welcome back to the Tarot Genie for this week's lesson in the cards of the tarot. Today we're going to discuss the card that makes people shudder and sometimes shriek when it pops up in a reading, or it's the card that I know that I have several friends for whom I read a few years ago, and they had not really had a tarot reading, and they said, what if I get the death, what if you pull the death card for me, or whatever. And so this card is one of the major ones, what I call the bad boys of the tarot, that people really fear getting. Now it's card number 13 in the tarot, and 13 adds up to a 4. Sorry, try to get that glare out of the way. And so that suggests it's kind of a structure of things. Now it's a structure of life, because life ends in death. I mean, there's beginnings and endings. And so one of the primary meanings of the death card is ending. And a lot of tarot readers emphasize saying it's transformation. Well, I think, yes, it is, but I think the most important focus or meaning associated with this card is the ending of something. It's the ending of a cycle, it's the ending of a situation, ending of life. Now, if this card comes up in a reading, it does not mean that someone's going to die at all. It typically means an ending of situation. That said, I will share that 2 years ago, so 2 to 3 years ago, I was getting some web work done with a woman, young woman about 38 years old. And she was quite a nice person. And we actually did an exchange where she did some web work for me, and then I did a tarot reading for her. And I think it was the outcome card, pretty sure, and I forget the question, it related to her career, etc. But she did receive, one of the cards in the reading was the death card. And I interpreted it to mean the ending of a particular, I guess, some situation in her life at the time, which she thought made sense. And anyway, we did some work, and about a month later, I hadn't heard back from her, and I emailed her about 3 times, didn't hear back. A few weeks passed, I didn't hear back. So I contacted the person I initially met her through. I said, where is so-and-so, I think Alex? And she said, oh, unfortunately, she died. And it was sudden death. She had sepsis or something. She wasn't in the greatest health. I mean, she was, she didn't look unhealthy to me at the time, but apparently she did have some conditions, and she wasn't on health insurance, or she had avoided it because of some of the cost. And so unfortunately, in that situation, the death card had come up in a reading. I wasn't asking whether she was delivered, and I don't know whether that was foreshadowing her death or not. But it did come up, and when I asked that following morning, what happened with her, and I literally got the death card again. So that's not a common situation. And I will say also, 5 years ago, when I was in a particular relationship, just keep showing you the death card every so often here, in a relationship where things were going amiss, awry, and I think it was in January of that year, February, I asked, okay, what's going on? And this is just a reading for myself, and the death card came up. I thought, oh no. But then everything seemed to revive, be fine again for a while. And then I asked again in May, because some things were starting to get a little weird, and the death card came up again. And what I found out was 2 months later, then the situation was over with the relationship, and I had to end it. Well, it was ending, and I definitively ended it. And I realized, looking back over time, that the first time I asked about it, it was really the beginning of the end. And then the second time it really had ended. I just didn't know it at the time, because things were going on that were hidden from me. So it really was the ending. So typically it represents an ending. The important symbols to look at in this, of course, you've got this fearsome knight, the skeletal knight on his white horse. The horse is moving forward, and it just means that and we see the dead king here, meaning that death stops for no one, that unfortunately we all die, but maybe that's fortunate because it's fair. And we have the Pope here, this bishop, who is kind of praying and almost looks like he's pleading. We have this young girl who's looking a bit upset, the child who's presenting a flower. We've got the white rose on the flag that this skeletal knight is carrying forth. So it means that no matter what, it thinks that death is inevitable, endings are inevitable. We see in the distance the boat. I think that boat, if I'm remembering correctly, is associated with kind of the river of the dead, something in the Egyptians. But overall, it looks very dire, it looks calamitous. But what's interesting, in the distance, we see this sun. And it could be either a sunrise or a sunset, or it can be both. Actually, I think it's both. It means both. Because death presents an ending, sunset of a situation, but after endings are beginnings, and life begins. Phoenix rising out of the ashes, etc. Just see if there's anything else to present or to note here for your information. It is, looking at the colors of the horse, it is a black and white situation, and that death is inevitable for any living creature. So that's a pretty black and white situation. We've got the gray background kind of reinforcing that. And it comes to everyone, even if you're a king, even if you're royalty, you're not going to escape death. Oh, and also, yes, what I wanted to say about the priest is he reminds me of the Hierophant, kind of the mediator between two worlds, the spiritual world and the material world. Kind of whoever's died, he does the blessings and the prayers for that spirit to move on. And the kneeling maiden, she's submitting to the inevitability of death. And some other points. So the keys, those are some of the key symbols to look at. The key meanings mean endings. They also mean transitions, a change. People will say transformation, mourning, release of a situation. This elimination of situation. Now the death card, even though it looks dire and it's called one of the bad boys of the tarot, it can be a positive card in a reading if it means the ending of a very difficult situation. Now, if this card was coming up, as we're saying in the Trump administration, is it going to continue or going to end? If death card came up, well, in my opinion, that would be a positive indicator because it's saying this situation is going to end. So it can be positive. If you're going through a financial difficulty and if the death card came up, it could possibly mean that situation is going to end. It's no longer going to bother you or be a problem. Now, the death card reversed can mean a variety of things. One possibility is that it could mean that a situation that you're in that's on its way out, this ending, but you are resisting it. You're not letting go. If say, for example, a relationship, and you had this come up, and you could say, well, it appears to be the ending, but you're resisting it. You're not letting it go. And you're not, or it could also suggest your mourning may be past the mourning time. You've ended it, the situation's ended, but you're just, again, not letting go of it. So it's the kind of the shadow side. You're just not letting it go. It also could, it could also represent you really fighting against it. Fighting against that. Really, no, I don't want to let go of this. So that's what it could also mean. Now the song or the music selection that seemed to make a lot of sense for me for this card, the death card, is Mozart's Requiem, because that's associated with death. But you can check it out and see if it resonates with you. And then also, excuse me for leaning over, forgot to put this back on the table. The book that I recommend for those of you learning the tarot this week is Tarot for Life. It's by Paul Quinn. He goes through all the cards of the tarot, explains each one. He gives, what I like is that he gives the attributes, he gives the positive and negative interpretations, reversals, and possible advice. He also, what I find especially helpful in this book, is that he gives examples, like I'll say a Four of Cups story, or well, let's see if we'll go back and make it relevant to today. He has a death story, okay. So he gives an example of a situation in which the death card came up and how he used that to resolve what he was going through, a particular situation he was going through, a particular attitude he had, etc. So particular advice. He said, let it go. He was angry about a particular situation. The death card came up and he decided, okay, the message is let it go. So this is this week's Major Arcana card, the Death card, number 13, about endings, about changes, but basically I think the key meaning is endings. And next week we will be looking at a card that represents kind of the midway point between things, flow, balance, etc., equilibrium. So that'll be next week's card. Until next time, illumine your mind, inspire your life with the tarot.